Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech, the worst name for a YouTube channel. My name is Angelo and today for the first time in 6 years I've been making videos for YouTube. I am on camera while talking or doing a graphical analysis. The reason is because I never felt more frustrated at a game than what I've been seeing at Gotham Knights. I prepare all my graphic cards, I pull them all out, and I was prepared to start testing. As I normally do, I start playing with my main PC. Okay, so I start recording as much as the game without any sort of metrics or FPS or nothing, just recording the game, taking pictures, and to prepare for the analysis and start showing images. That's normally how it goes. After that, I show metrics, I start recording metrics in how frame rate and so on, and then I start testing different GPUs and see how it behaves. So the first impression I had of the game was, this game is it's not bad actually, graphically speaking, and these are technical analysis, so I don't normally talk about gameplay, okay? And so if you don't like the game, that's okay. This is about graphics and technology. So the thing is, I started recording this, and the game ran very smooth on my RTX 4090 and Intel 12600K. You will say, oh well, if you can play this smoothly on that hardware, then what can the rest of us hope? So initially I thought, well, this is very well optimized, especially because the GPU wasn't that used. Even though I was playing a 4K with ray tracing on, the GPU was around 40% usage, and I was like, wow, this is so good optimized in terms at least of graphic, right? So I kept playing and playing until you get thrown to the open world. That's when everything went to hell, because the results I started to see didn't make any sense. And this is where I want to put and talk about the conversation that they were saying that the Xbox Series S was, limiting the next gen. Because this is absolutely not true, at least for Gotham Knights. I don't know, maybe there is some game that had some very bad problems because they had to make it work on Series S. But Gotham Knight is not one of those games. Because when I was thrown to the open world, I was barely getting 60 FPS. I was around 55 to 58 frames per second with a 12,600K. And the GPU was not the problem, because that GPU was only being used 40% usage. And I even testing putting the minimum frame rate for dynamic resolution at a 120 FPS, just trying to force the engine to lower the resolution as much as it needed to get to 120 to see if I could at least get 60 FPS, and that did not happen. So what happened is I saw the engine lowering the resolution to like a very, blurry image, but the FPS didn't go up even by 1 FPS, meaning that the CPU was being the problem. So normally I will say, yes, of course, there are some games that are very CPU limited. But in this case, this is a 12,600K. If you're telling me the CPU can get to even 60 FPS, I'm not asking for 100 or 120, there is something very wrong with your game. Especially because the CPU was not being utilized as it was supposed to. It was not 100% usage or even 80% usage, not even 60% usage. So there is something clearly wrong with the way these games work, where it cannot use your full CPU. So to test this, I tested the game on my all i7 6700K to see how much of a CPU limitation it was. And to my surprise, yes, it was lower, but it was not much. It was not by much. Which means that there is a way this game is working where it uses maybe 2 or 3 cores at full or 60% or whatever, and then the rest is not being used at all. Because you will have expect to see at least on a 7-year CPU, which is only 4 cores and 8 thread compared to the other one, which is 6 core, 12 thread plus 4 efficient cores, you expect to see at least a 50% difference, at least. And no, that's not the case. There was a difference of 10 frames per second, showing that there is something completely wrong. However, even after seeing this whole situation, I decided to keep testing. So I was going to start testing with the other GPUs I have. So the first one I started testing was at the 1060 on my 10400F, on my Intel 10400F. So, you know, for my surprise, the 1060 is capable of 60 FPS if you set the game right. It wasn't very difficult to get to 60 FPS. So I was, so this game is well optimized when it comes to the graphic part of it, because I can get 60 FPS even on a 1060. But okay, let's, you know, put the game and limit it to 30. And the reason I limited to 30 was because I wanted stability. And I said, well, you know, the 1060 is an old car, so yeah, it could be ups and downs. And then I limited to 30 and I upped the resolution to 4040p and put FSR on quality mode. So I could have a better resolution, you know, worse frame rate because I wasn't having 60, but it's still very, you know, stable frame rate, and the game worked very, very nice, you know. It's like the game was made for 30 FPS and the engine doesn't understand going over that, because when then I tried to test the next GPU, the 2060, and I put it on the system, that's when I decided to stop testing and not going anymore, because there is no point. The 1060, I activated DLSS, I put ray tracing and without ray tracing, and the game I couldn't get over 60 FPS, no matter what, even though the GPU was only 60% to 70% utilized. So that means there is a problem on the CPU, no matter what GPU I tested. If I put a 3060 in that machine, I will have gotten the same results. Maybe a bit higher resolution, but always to that limit, because that's as much as the game was willing to go with a 10400, which again was not being used at 100%. So what was the point? What is the point of keep testing if you cannot even get to what I consider the minimum of 60 FPS? I understand there are older CPUs and you have to play with 30 FPS or older GPU, but this is not the case. I was able to get to 60 FPS with a 2060, and still being the 2060 was only used for like 60% of percentage, and still that was the top. So if I put a 3060, I wasn't going to get any more frames. So what's the point of keep testing with this game? This game is telling me a 10400F is not enough to keep 60 FPS at all times, which is just stupid. And this is the same problem we saw with the A Plague Tale's Wrecking. These two games have come recently showing that they are CPU bound and CPU unoptimized. It's not a problem of, oh, you know, the hardware is slow. No. These games are badly unoptimized on the CPU front. It's not a GPU issue. It's not. An RTX 4090 at 4K with ray tracing was only 40% usage. However, the CPU couldn't get over 60 FPS at 1200. Then the same story happens with a 2060 but with a 10400. So it's clear this engine has a problem with CPU utilization. It's very clear for that the engine has a big issue. So when they say that the Series S is the one holding back, it's not true, because the Series S has enough CPU power to move these games at 60 FPS, and the GPU on the Series S, even if you have to play a 720p, has more than enough to 60 FPS, considering a 1060 is capable of 60 FPS. So we can see that there is a problem with the CPU, and the CPU of the Series S is almost as good as the CPU on a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X. So you cannot tell me that Series S is the one holding back, because the CPU is basically the same on those other machines. So if that's the ones holding, those other two will be holding you too. So yeah, it's a very frustrating situation. It's a very unoptimized game, like very, very unoptimized game. And it's sad because I really, really wanted to give this game a chance. I really wanted to at least prove that graphically the game is good. And I think it's good in terms of graphics, you know, textures, lighting, ray tracing, and all the options modeling. Animations are not good, to be honest. They are very robotic, but well, you know, that's another discussion. But in terms of graphic by itself, yeah, it's not bad. I quite liked it. But you know, if you cannot enjoy the game, and I am not willing to play this at 30 FPS, not because I don't like 30 FPS. I can play, and I have played many games at 30 FPS. Actually, the Horizon Forbidden West game, I played it in the resolution mode at 30 FPS. No problem. I didn't care. Because that's, you know, it was justified. But there is no way you can justify the way this game plays on even high-end PCs. This is just a mess of a game when it comes to that. And that's all I can say for it. I would not recommend this game to anyone, especially if you have the hardware to move it at 60, because you are going to feel frustrated. If you are limited and you say, you know, I will never be able to play this at 60 on my PC, you probably will enjoy better, because the game will run very good if you limit it to 30 FPS. Because I think the engine was created thinking for 30 FPS as the target, because probably the game was targeting the last generation of consoles, and they never really changed that you know, configuration settings, so the game is still stuck on the past. Unfortunately, this is the situation. I'm very disappointed. 2 games this week that they are not running the way they should. I hope this changes, and fast. Thank you very much, and see you on the next video.